And with this, over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction. Yeah, let us get started. Yeah, actionable steps. Yeah, so in the last session we talked about, and also in the previous sessions when Lukas was talking about extensibility, we talked already a lot about what is clean core and how do we are able to analyze both from a, what we call governance maturity, both from the aspect how am I well set up, how well am I set up as an organization to achieve a clean core, but also from the KPI side, from the key performance indicators, so for data-driven insights, how we are able to understand how clean core sort of like works in the organization. And I would like to repeat a little bit from the last time, but then double click on a couple of things in more detail. So what I said, I want to repeat. I mean, maybe some of you have joined the past session, maybe some of you haven't, and I was already presenting that particular slide here when we talk about how to achieve a clean business process. So how to achieve a clean core in the context of the clean core business process principle. And when we talk about actions or things that you and your organizations can do to either stay clean or get clean, then obviously this how-to slide that actually exists for all of the 5 clean core principle is a central sort of like a cornerstone of that. And I was saying the last time already that we divided, or I divided when I created the slide, into 4 sections, and one section here talking about having an end-to-end tool chain, the organization being established, and the transformation methodology, both for an initial transformation but also for a continuous transformation that's happening, for example, after you've transitioned to an SAP S/4HANA solution. So that is one of the key elements that we see as being, I would say, required or a necessity in order to achieve a clean core, keep the core clean, but also to establish activities, measures to remediate enhancements and get clean. So both of those 2 journeys, stay clean, get clean. And what it is that we describe here in this 3 sort of like bullet points underneath is that such an end-to-end tool chain has various components, but the 3 key components that are here for the immediate and most important interest is to have an enterprise architecture management in place. Again, the ratio behind this that if you as an organization do not have any insights in your overall enterprise architecture into your solutions that you have purchased, that are existing, that are being running in an organization, then it can be easily that you sort of like reinvent the wheel and enhance a process where actually another solution that is already in sort of like in your organization being established will be much more suitable for. So you want to make enhancements only when they really add value, but you also want to make not enhancements where there are already other solutions in place. And obviously, when you talk about having a clean business process, it's pretty obvious that business process management is not just a nice to have, but it's a necessity. Understanding your modular process and your end-to-end processes, which is, if you follow the slide in block 2 and block 3, but from a tool chain to have a tool in place, a tooling that allows you to model, define, design processes, leverage, for example, SAP's reference business process content, but also to understand where you have deviations and record them as delta requirements. Having recorded the delta requirements from a business, from a functional point of view, in a business process management, but also then have an application lifecycle management, which allows you to evaluate what does it mean in order to realize such a business requirement to a standard process. So is it just a simple configuration, which would be classified as being a fit that you can do with a configuration, or is there a profound gap that requires development, and is that development activity actually resulting in creating additional technical debt? So that's is essential, yeah, and in order to really drive on scale a clean core and also to establish governance, yeah, in the organization. Equally important as with probably anything in life is not to have just a tool, but to have the organizations to ensure that you have people empowered to use those tools of the tool chains, as parts of the tool chains, and that you have them obviously across all of the functions, in the sense of like having enterprise architecture, having business process owners, local ones, global ones, for example. And you need to have, I would almost want to say strict. When I was just talking, you have to have setting up the governance guidelines. For example, when you make enhancements, when you request have a request from your business process responsibles to enhance something, and how this request is being documented, how it's being articulated, for example, when it comes to what is the need, what is the value, what is the criticality. Those things you want to define. You also want to define a decision-making process. So who in the organization is the entity, is the governance body who makes a decision on that one. So that tool itself, having those people, think we would define that. So we have the tool, we have the people, but we also need the real content, and otherwise it's getting not practical. And as I said in a couple of seconds ago, we have reference content available from SAP when it comes both to the processes, but also the capabilities, which is the second point I'm pointing out here. And to have a business capability map in pretty simple, straightforward terms, we see as a necessity in order to understand, hey, hang on a moment, are these capabilities which are super differentiating for us as an organization, that gives us a hint that enhancements in such a particular area are more likely to be approved, I would say, directionally, because they're differentiating us as an organization, whether these are capabilities where we would consider ourselves as not being anyhow different than another organization, and we would rather like to limit any investment into those. Again, at the end, this will always remain a case-by-case decision. I want to be clear about that. But having not such a tool chain and a content at that level, right, makes it very dynamic on how the decision goes. You want to try to build up these tools and this content in order to guardrail such decisions at the end of the day. You also want to map your it's future-proof application architecture, so not your necessarily only your as-is architecture, but your to-be architecture, saying, okay, this is the architecture that I see in my organization. Technology is moving fast. What components do I see today and in the future in order to fulfill these business capabilities? Because if a request comes in to enhance something, now really thinking about Clean Core as an S/4HANA system, then the question is, okay, where else could I do that? What type of capability it is? And at the end of the day, it matters whether this IT solution is just in the planning or in the procurement phase, or is being already fully deployed. And obviously, from a time point of view, that's why it's spelled out here so explicitly, you need to have a roadmap as an organization. So if you say I have a requirement and actually this leads to another application, I need to know whether this application is really there or accessible, or whether it will be just available in a couple of months or years' time. Double clicking from the enterprise architecture side to the capability side, and I said it at the beginning when I was talking about the tool chain, why we need tools, why we think tools are essential, is that we want to have the end-to-end process and the functional processes being made transparent, being set up. There's obviously always a discussion how deep I'm gonna go, what is sustainable to maintain. But having absolutely no common understanding about end-to-end and functional processes is kind of like, I would say, a bit of a dilemma when it comes to decision-making processes. You need to go at least to a certain level, and we see this being different from company to company we're working with, in order to understand, okay, who are the owners, and what is basically the entity against which are going to, for example, create a business requirement, which are further analyzed as a technical data requirement, and then understand whether it's a fit or a gap. I want to also inherit kind of like the classification of the capabilities into the processes, saying are these standard processes, differentiating processes, or processes that are worthwhile innovating because they are really differentiating myself and I want to innovate. So that is the third pillar. And then, even though it's a terminology that you might be familiar, it's in place if you implement SAP rather than you're in a continuous run phase. But it's this fit to standard philosophy and mindset to implement, so that you really look first what is in standard, and then you understand whether you want to differentiate yourself from standard, and for a very good reason. And you build something, but you don't build something that is just being built for the sake of being built, but that really adds value. In that sense, also, if you see the 4 bullet points, we're saying analyzing the current processes and identify potential for standardization is something that you would like kind of to do on an ongoing basis, yeah? Because also the customers you're working often are customers that have invested a lot into development activities, and then it's kind of like hard to let go from these development activities and gonna go into like I make a get clean journey. Understanding how well these processes are performing and also thinking about how could these processes look in the future are kind of important, because you do not want to just re-platform existing code into new code that is a little bit cleaner or maybe much cleaner, but you also want to really do it with a lens of like where I can leapfrog basically and say I come from old enhancements that I've done maybe in a simplify now in a sub GUI world, and I understand there is a world with Fiori, with for example workzone, with AI, and understanding how basically I maybe do not need some of these enhancements any longer, because SAP has catched up over the past years with, for example, the recent 2025 release from S/4HANA, and helps me to redesign my process entirely. Using pre-configured best practice as a design baseline. So use SAP standard as it's being delivered both from a reference content and also from a configuration content. Centrally govern the to-be process design and the business process requirements. So having a business process design and having these requirements, is essential in order to drive decisions. Very often, that's where this content comes from, is if we go to customers, we see a lot of enhancement, but no one can say why they've been done, with what priority have been done, whether there's been a course decision. So it's like a complete unclear picture, and that's what you want to avoid. And obviously also you need to communicate these design principles. So if you run, for example, a new implementation, that you're very clear, okay, what are the design principles that you want to adhere to, and you communicate, because at the end of the day, that is key to drive success. So you can also already see when we look at these 4 pillars here, that there are basically actions sitting behind that an organization want to take, irrespectively of the type of transformation. What we have done, and again, this is not new, we've said, okay, to make this more actionable for any customer, and all customers are different in their journey. There are their pre-S4, post-S4, where they're in a fairly simple environment, or whether they're in a multinational, multi-country kind of like environment where they have heterogeneous processes. We said we need to look at it from 2 angles. We need to look at it from the angle of the governance maturity. How well is an organization already set up? And very often, if we talk to organizations, they have done things around clean core with these 5 clean core principles. And I said it the last time, is not entirely new. As I say, probably gave the example of data and data archiving. That is not new. Also in extensibility, Lukas probably would agree. It's not uncommon to have development guidelines. It's just a question: are they up to date? Are they accurate? Are they really being followed both by in-house and potentially external workforce that is supporting? And that is a case-by-case decision. And when I'm looking at my role as an enterprise architect, I go to customers. I cannot judge. Sometimes even the customer cannot judge themselves, because you ask 3 people and you get like 4 opinions. And with this governance maturity, we want to facilitate a structured discussion that basically then also leads to actions. And I'll show an example in a minute. Similar on the KPIs, latest when it comes to making actions, and the actions involve a budget, involve time commitment. The question comes: what's the value of doing clean core? And if you do not have any KPIs that you are signing up to as an organization, then it's hard to basically justify, because KPIs are like the foundation to calculate any sort of value, quantifiable value of clean core. And you can see the relation, just for those who have not might joined the past session, or it's a bit of repetition, that whatever you're going to do in governance maturity, whatever actions you're going to take, again, I give the example of data archiving. So if you have a data archiving process in place, it's more likely that your KPI around data volume are looking good. If you have not set up any data archiving strategy, there's no wonder that the the data archiving potential is growing every month, basically, literally. So, I mean, this is again typically something where customers have already taken measures, but it's just to illustrate between understanding where you are and understanding your KPIs test relation. All of what I just said is part of the Rise of SAP methodology. So in the sense that the governance maturity that we show you, we will soon see as being part of the Clean Core Quality Gate framework as a deep dive version. And when we look at the governance maturity side now, again, a bit of a recap, but probably also as a deep dive to show you the sort of the consistency in the slides and the way we're going to think here, right? We'll look into these different practices that we're going to call into the maturity of enterprise architecture management, and here, second one, into the maturity of the business process management, asking ourselves together when I'm sitting together in a room with a customer, okay, how well I am set up when it comes to the enterprise architecture management and business process management practice. And I was explaining on the house slide already why those two practices are so important from our point of view when it comes to having clean core business processes. And what you then basically do, and this is an example of an assessment, yeah, we assess those individual practices, yeah, and you can see here, when you look to the right now on the processes side, the enterprise architecture management, and you can see a line which here goes right to the outer edge of the spider diagram, which says that customer that did the assessment said, yeah, I really want to be very high on the target. Yeah, I think Lukas probably also said it. I said it. We are not always expecting everyone says I want to really be at level 5, but in this particular example, and this is an example of a customer case. Yeah, I mean, I could have thrown it myself, but it's a real customer case. That customer said I want to be at a 5, and you can see just with this visualization probably that there is a gap. There's a gap between the score, the current score, and the target score, both here on processes. Even though if you talk about processes, I brought extensibility just to show you the extensibility is even more sort of like, you know, more facets because it has more practices that we're going to look into it. Looks a little bit different, but there is a difference. And yeah, the bigger the difference, I think is pretty obvious, the more actions it would take in order to reach the maturity. If we do the double click, and I did it in the example of process deviation management the last time, and I did it on slides more from a theoretical basis, but you can see if we run here now the assessment for that particular customer, you can see the little arrow saying I want to be a 5, but you can also see the current score in this particular practice of enterprise architecture management, which is only a 1.2 out of 5. Again, I want to repeat, it's not about it's a 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.25. It's about a bigger scheme of things. It's about what you saw in the spider diagram to understand where a customer itself, yeah, first of all, sees the biggest need to improve. Doesn't mean that they will immediately take actions there because the actions involve time, money, and resources, but it helps to understand where to do in the second round, in the second iteration, a double click, defining actions, fine-tuning actions, and going forward. You can see answers, beginner, immediate, yeah, and these type of answers, and I didn't illustrate it the last time in detail. They are basically coming from a rating from beginner to immediate, so on a scaled approach. Yeah. When we do these assessments, yeah, it's also here supported, as you can see, by the application that we're using here is we make notes, we make comments, yeah, understanding, we have a discussion, yeah. It's not like I'm presenting now a monologue, but it's a dialogue, yeah. And just by discussing these things, typically actions already fall out, right? So in the sense of like, yeah, I have 3 people sitting in a room. Yeah? As an example, very often it is like more than one person who owns such a topic. And then there's a conversation, yeah, then even just discussing how would we rate ourselves leads typically to different interpretation of the current score and what can be done when it comes to the target score. Yeah? So very often the sort of like the most concrete output even happens on the next steps, on potential actions when this discussion takes place. Very often it's also not new what is being discussed. It was just not a matter of fact, no one had the priority or the time to do it, which still could be the case, but it helps to shape out what now could be done out of that discussion already. And I just, yeah, another example in the business process management. So when it comes to driving the action governance maturity as one way of defining actions, yeah. And now I'll go back to the slide version. Those questions, as I just said on when I was showing it out of a real customer case. Now we are more on the standard slide where again basically helps to identify specific next steps. Yeah, and it's really this conversation that drives an understanding within an organization, also from an outside point of view, and then go into the details. So, if, for example, if I take out the questions, have you defined a target North Star architecture for your enterprise, which includes business capabilities, data application, and technology architecture? And just take an example, obviously a little bit anonymous, but still like kind of like real. No, we don't have a North Star architecture. We don't have business capabilities. We don't say what differentiates us. We don't know, we don't have an application architecture overview. Yes, yeah, we could ask 10 people and they would tell us what application exists. That obviously there is an action. Yeah, I did it a little bit, simplistically, let me say it this way. But this conversation itself, as I just said, leads already to potential next steps, saying like, for example, in business capabilities, very often, yes, we have a business capability map, but sometimes we have more than one, but not one for the organization. Yeah. Sometimes, yes, we've started, but we never managed to complete such a business capability map. So yeah, I just want to kind of like reinforce the message. Yeah, just talking about it itself already has a value. And the fact that we have a scoring behind that one gives a like clear indication across all of the clean core principle on all of the practices where the biggest gap is and where most likely the next steps should be taken. Yeah, as I said, also here a double click on, I think we haven't shared that so specifically, that's why I want to include it in here, as we look at this particular maturity rating. So when we do this governance maturity, we said we have a scale from 0 to 5 to help ourselves to lead a discussion and do a scoring. And we have not a description on each of the evaluation criteria. So what is a beginner and what is an advanced level, an expert level. It's a combined one across the practice, but this one basically also illustrates where I am and how far do I want to go as an organization. So is everything in the enterprise architecture practice ad hoc or informal, and it's not an official practice that have been established, and there are tools that are commonly used across an organization? Then obviously the next step in the sense of an activity, which is here expressed as a maturity level, I want to think about, for example, to start with an architecture documentation. And then the next step is I have one, but I want to build a roadmap. And once I build a roadmap, I want to maybe also, this is a proficient level that we see is needed, integrate BPM with ALM, that I don't build a silo, but that the process models, in this case, for example, that I build in the process management solution like Signavio, that they are become part of cloud of an ALM solution like Cloud ALM, and that they're being reused and the requirements are being recorded. So also, trying to make a little bit color on the maturity rating, and I hope that works for you, helps to unlock ideas of potential next steps and actions. As I just said. When we talk about business process management as another practice here, and again, I want to repeat on the very first slide, we already seen that process management obviously is both from a toolchain point of view, but also from a content point of view, important when it comes about having a clean core process. Then here specific questions are there, and there's not really a lot. And if you're familiar with the topic, it's probably fairly simple. That we ask, do you have functional processes? Do you have end-to-end processes? So if you, for example, have no functional processes, okay, how can you determine which is a subject matter expert who makes a decision whether something should be enhanced, whether there's value in enhancing it, what are the side effects, and so forth on. So don't want to overstress this, but that's another sort of like example on whether this discussion leads basically also to ideas. And similar also here at that level, and for all of the other practices, we have a maturity rating and a description behind that one who illustrates and who helps. In all honesty, I have to say, typically once we illustrated one time that there's a 0 and there's a 5, very often no one really says, I need to now go through the exact scheme, because it's clear 5 is like, I'm the best in class. I could invite every sort of like everyone to my organization presenting, for example, how do I do business process management? I think I'm like a reference, I'm a role model of that one. And 0 means I haven't hardly started. And then anything in between, yeah, is sometimes just the comparison between my current and my target score to understand, am I a 1 and want to go to 3, or am I 2 or a 4? At the end of the day, if you're 1 or 3 and 2 or 4, doesn't matter so much. It matters more that out of that discussion you think already, is 4 reachable, and if 4 is reachable, what would I need to do? Again, in this process of rating, you already think about what could be actions. Now, the second part of the equation of the clean core measurement framework are the KPIs. In the area of business process management, I presented in the last session these 4 KPIs that we've set up, whereas 3 are kind of like interlinked with each other. The process fit to standard alignment, the process fit to standard alignment gaps, and the alignment to clean core. So central for us is to understand whether I do make enhancements or do I need enhancements, and if I need them, are they of a nature of a gap? And if they are a nature of a gap, do they kind of like violate extensibility and integration design principles? So that is here, the overall goal, and that is also what basically customers really use to steer their project. There was just a Taggart the past couple of days, beginning of November, and an American oil and gas company, or energy company, I think is more precise to say, reported about their new implementation project and how they're going to apply clean core principles in that particular project, looking at setting themselves up for how close they want to be to standard or in standard or leveraging standard. And they have set up KPIs very similar to what you see on the slide. So just to saying, that is not a totally new concept, let me say, or total new set of KPIs, or something that we're just kind of like making up, but something this is already in customers who have probably also more complex transitions, maybe consolidating systems or having a lot of like technical depth and need to drive really change, that they're going to leverage, because what you can't measure, you can't steer. And for such a type of transformation where you really want to go to standard, I don't like the word back to standard, because back sounds you make a step back, which is not the idea, but you're just closer to standard. It's maybe the expression I like more. You need to have also the management buy-in, because it requires at the end of the day change. Now, when we talk about actions here, and just to illustrate it with this picture, an action is that you deploy or define a methodology. And here we're going to use sort of like I use visualization of running a project across Subactivate, or the Rise of SAP methodology, if you want to say it like that, across the 5 phases from discover, prepare, explore, realize, and obviously at the end of the day run. And you do fit to standard in the explore phase. You're preparing the fit to standard in the prepare phase by, for example, under setting up, if you now talk SAP language, SAP Signavio, importing reference content, redefining probably in most cases also the end-to-end processes to make them even better fit to your organization. So have reference content as a starting point, but tailor it. And then with this sort of like list of processes, a BPML master list. In the old days, I was using Excel spreadsheets as a consultant in my workshops. I go and then prepare my workshops. I prepare my systems. So I always say it's a dual monitor approach, and execute the projects. And I'm going to record what kind of like daily requirements do I have, prioritize them, and then hand them over to the design. And you can see, if you think this process through, that obviously is both from an action, an ask to, hey, we need to have a methodology outline for a transformation project who looks, for example, like that. We need to have tools in place who support, I would say, each of these activities here, particularly the fit to standard analysis activities. And what I want to just quickly jump into is, if you look into how we now can support such a transformation, and I said it beforehand, a lot of what we discuss here, or most of what we discuss, is first of all product neutral. Yeah, so we talk about the need of having enterprise architecture management. We're talking about the need of having a business process management in place. But as you very well aware of, we've said we invest a lot in buying and acquiring tools, investing into tools, developing tools, integrating tools of our tool chain. And one is being Signavio since 2021. And we have, and we call it SAP S/4HANA Activate Accelerator, which basically showcases how you as a customer can leverage, if you, for example, have Signavio in your organization, how can you use it as part of an S/4HANA transformation? And in here, I just want to click on one collaborate during and after Fit to Standard workshop execution, make sure all relevant topics are documented. That is, real life. What you do, you make a target process design. This is the bigger number 2 that we're in, and you run the Fit to Standard workshop. So if I simply click through the demo, because this is not a Signavio demo session, but it's just a little bit more of, as I said, putting color into the words. Then you have your processes, and you says here very explicitly, and just read it out, during the workshop, the moderator shows the process in the sandbox system. So you saw the slide. There was also a duality. I saw the dual screen approach of showing the slide, showing the system, and showing the process. Yeah, sometimes process first, then going to the system. And here, basically, this is being done in parallel. So not a traditional, I open a Word document and I type in something and add comments, but it's really working on the system. So basically adding comments on the process level, for example, but also, and that's what I want to say, we can edit the process model. If something comes up as an entirely new step, enrich it. So saying, hey, here is something different, which itself is a delta already. But then once we, for example, added here into the standard flow a new process step, using this is a Signavio dictionary to manage the requirements. And managing the requirements basically says, hey, I record a new requirement, I open this one, I say there is no existing requirement, so let me create a new requirement. And I have here, and this is freely configurable, opportunity to saying what is the requirement, what is the category, adding a text, adding further information. So we have one central place. And that's what we meant by not running running an implementation or being in a continuous improvement, not having any proper tooling and framework and content in place, but being able to leverage such environment obviously makes it much, much easier to implement the clean core philosophy and to govern and steer that philosophy, because what is not being recorded in here doesn't exist. And if you are very strict on this one, then you can get as an organization an overview about your delta requirements and then handle them further downstream into further analysis into how it's being realized and so forth on. So actions that you're going to take in a new implementation is methodology, defining methodology, preparing tools, as I said a couple of times already, making these tools actionable with like having content in the tools, having role owners who are knowledgeable about the tools, and then really use the tools and not just have them and then still do the work in a traditional manner. The double click on the KPIs is that when you perform the Fit to Standard workshops, you record the daily requirements. They make a reference to the business processes. We classify them into, and said it earlier on, into fit and gaps. So something that can be done and achieve standard configuration is a fit, something that requires either development activities or goes beyond the sort of like the level of a normal configuration. So I think the last time I already mentioned, it's not like having, it's okay to have more than one payment term in the system. If you deliver 3, you can have 5, but if you have 150, it's always already kind of like violating from the way we find the clean core business process principle. It's also violating because it's a little bit too much. No one needs so many, in this case, payment terms typically, unless there's a very good justification for that one. So think about a template rollout where every time you go to a new country, rolling out a new S/4HANA template, even though ECC might be in place, you catch additional configuration of the system becomes more and more complex to handle. end user usability, long drop down lists. If you do any sort of like upgrade, you need to test all of the variants. That's what you do not want unless it's really, really needed. So this classification of delta requirements that are being recorded in a feature standard workshop methodology, I would say, is basically then leading to the second KPI, the gaps, and then the understanding whether these gaps can be aligned with a clean core principle or that they cannot be aligned, so that they're requiring either extensibility mechanisms, such as I need to make a business modification, or that I, for example, need to use compatibility scope, because that's what's being asked. This is more from the configuration point of view, says that then I'm not aligned. So those KPIs are the ones that drives it. And again, if you want to say that from the actions you want to take is, in this particular case, that you have a mandatory list of how you classify requirements into fit and gaps, and that you have follow-up activities once you have classified them as gaps. We released already, almost a year ago, a Clean Core Process white paper. In this Clean Core Process white paper, you will find a classification that we suggest here into fit and gaps, so that you can see how we sort of like differentiating here. And you can see, for example, we have the gaps in the process deviation that I mentioned a few times already, which are the ones that we then saying, if you have a requirement to extend in presentation, application, or data to meet a specific process deviation, from a standard system behavior, so the one that I basically would show as a functional consultant in an S/4HANA system, then this extension might lead to a non-conformance, and then we have all the delta requirements that are violating the clean extension integration guidelines. These are the ones that we want to tag in there. That's what I prepared for today. Repeating a little bit where we're building up the last session on. Hope give you some insights on activities that I would say Lukas, myself, and a lot of other colleagues in the enterprise architecture hemisphere, at least, performing with customers and having that set. I would look into the questions, if there are any.
So, Michael, thanks a lot for your explanation, for your insights. I think it was a lot of information. The slides were also full of information. And so to our audience, and now is the chance to bring up the questions. There is one question that just arrived in the chat. So probably.
Yeah, I can answer it. I saw it. Yeah. Thanks.
But you should read it, because it was just for hosts and panelists. So we should.
Apologies. I just realized. I read just like literally word by word the question. So Norbert, thanks for the question. First of all, Norbert asked, many tools, many workshops. It seems as though the clean core paradigm is designed only for large companies. In addition, many customers are not in PCE RISE, but on premise. What would be your answer for a small, medium-sized company that has fewer resources of its own, but still recognizes the need for clean core? In my opinion, a clean core light approach would be nice. Let me think about where I start. First of all, I would say I agree. Maybe not with the many tools and many workshops. Maybe less to the many workshops. Yes, there are tools that we believe are required, and that can be challenging. And I try to set it in between. Not every customer probably needs every tool immediately. So and small sounds always a bit negative, but if you can survive with having a list of your applications in an Excel spreadsheet and don't need a sophisticated business capability map, then that's also fine, right? And this is what I try to express also with this governance and maturity. We can dictate what someone needs to do in order to achieve a clean core. We cannot even say how clean someone necessarily should be unless we have a very specific case. So I said the last time, if a customer says, I want to be in a public cloud by 2030, for example, then obviously the logical consequence is no more business modifications, stick to standards. So there are sort of like, correlations and causalities that we can explain. But other than that, we are sort of like, I think, recognizing, or at least I'm recognizing what you say, that it must be doable for an organization. And that means doable means maybe for small organizations, sometimes less tools. It might mean also to focus on what matters most, what is most critical. And saying, for example, yeah, it would be nice to have a picture perfect enterprise architecture and a target architecture, but I don't need this. I don't need maybe business processes to the nth level, because maybe my headquarter is in a wonderful city in Germany and I'm not spread all over the world with different process variants. So it must be adaptable. I cannot classify now what clean core light would mean. I can only say I would spend a little bit of time to going through the clean core, also with this governance maturity, having, I would say, intensive discussion, and then draw a line and saying, hey, for me as an organization, that is what I can achieve. That's what's feasible. That's my probably where I see the highest priority. That's what I do. The rest I don't do. And then sort of like get started on this one. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. And the other one is it doesn't really relate a lot to PCE and RISE. I mean, I said a couple of times the word RISE. I said the RISE of SAP methodology dashboard. I think also we covered this, I think, in the last session when Lukas was talking about extensibility. There are tools when it comes now to extensibility KPIs that have nothing to do with RISE. So you don't need to be a RISE customer and using the RISE of SAP methodology dashboard as much as we would like to see this. And also the methodology and the governance maturity questions, even though I said they will become part of the RISE FP methodology, they're accessible in the appendix yeah, we call it digital asset management, DAM links. So yeah, permanent links that we update if something new comes, so you don't have to download, but just bookmark the link. So you're not, let me say, restricted in the sense. So we try to decouple it as much as it's sort of like, I would say, possible from RISE. Even though we say if someone does RISE, we encourage to do it with a clean core mindset. Otherwise, there's no change. At the end of the day, you end up in RISE exactly where you were before, and that's also not what we want. So yeah, long answer again, sorry. Short answer is yes, different from customer to customer. Recommendation is look through this content, yeah, play around with that, and make an approach that fits, yeah, what your particular customer or your particular customer situation.
All right, thank you for that. I can't see more questions. The Q&A tool is still available, chat also. I give a couple of more minutes, and to those who are in our session today, I've already posted the link to the materials, where to find the materials of all previously conducted sessions. We are not finished with our Clean Core webcast, but all sessions that we conduct are available under the playlist that I have just posted in the chat again. So this is a YouTube playlist and it's publicly available, so I can only encourage you to leverage this asset. So I can't see any additional questions, but there might be some. So if you don't have questions right now, you might be also willing to bring up your question in YouTube. There is a comments field where you can, of course, also post your question, or of course, contact Michael directly, because he is our expert for this topic. And especially if you have a very specific situation and you don't want to share it with everyone, of course, it's absolutely okay and fine if you prefer to contact Michael directly. His email address will be included in the PDF of this session that will be also available. And with this, I suggest we finish the session for today. Thank you very much to our experts, also to our experts for the chat. And of course, to our audience, stay with us, tune in next week. Next week, we will start another topic or another area that is related to Clean Core. We will talk about data and how important to have data, relevant and valid and clean data for the concept of Clean Core. And of course, yes, and of course, we will be very happy if you can tune in next week. With this, thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you very much. And yeah, hope to see you somewhere, remote, online, virtual, whatever. Thanks. Have a good rest of the day.
I can see one raised hand. It's gone.
Maybe it was say goodbye. Who knows? Otherwise, yeah.